back to the Astrology Interview. And this week, I have such a pleasure to be with Jane Sanders. Now, Jane and I have known each other, gosh, a while now, Jane, isn't it? About 20 years, maybe, something like that?
Time, yeah.
Yeah. Jane is a mindful space psychotherapist, and she's been doing that work for 35 years. And she also obviously works with people in trauma, because people who come to see psychotherapy, we're all sitting on trauma, and that's what this video is going to be about particularly. But she's also very involved with eco-psychology and develops a curriculum to train counselors and therapists from the first year into the whole concept about what eco-psychology is, and we'll be talking about that as well as we go through the video. But for this particular conversation that we want to have is about ancestral trauma, because I didn't know Jane's chart and I didn't know her story until we had a conversation a couple of days ago. And I said, oh, let me have a look at your chart. And this is what has brought us to this video right now. So, Jane, when I looked at your chart, and I will share your chart in a minute, when I looked at your chart, because what we were initially going to talk about what it was like to live with a potentially life-threatening illness that you have picked, that you're living with at the moment. And I looked at your chart and saw this very, very heavy 12th house influence in your chart. And for me, immediately what came, the words that came were ancestral lineage. And I immediately emailed you and said, are you aware that you could be holding ancestral trauma? Now, Jane, do you want to explain your story from here?
Yeah, I mean, I was really interested that you picked up on that so quickly. You know, that I'm one of these people, I don't really follow. I love astrology, but it never goes in. I don't, I can't really take it in and follow it, but I love it. But yes, so you asked me if there were kind of ancestors involved in healing that were maybe had to hide or be
Yes.
persecuted in some way. And so my great grandfather, Asador Aram Altunian, was a pure Armenian. And he left Armenia actually before the genocide in 1915, 16, something like that, and settled in Aleppo, Syria. And he was his mum was the only person in the village who could read, and he went from living this tiny little place in Armenia to training as a doctor and as a surgeon in America and Germany and all over the place. So he came back and wanted to bring those skills back, and he traveled to Aleppo. So although he personally missed the genocide, a lot of people came from Armenia to Syria, and he was very involved in kind of taking care of a lot of people from there.
And I think this really shows with Pluto in the 12th with you and what struck me was, because I asked about whether they were healers, because it's in Virgo. And often in my experience of working with clients with a heavy 12th house, there is a sense of something being hidden, with Pluto here bringing the trauma into that. And then you also got the sun there as well. So it felt like the ancestral line was involved with this. And also you've got the North Node. So there's something going on here for you to work out on some level. And it's so interesting that you have chosen your life career as a psychotherapist.
Yeah, you think I might be in the right profession?
Might be. After all of these years. But tell us more about your ancestral line.
So the Armenian side, they settled in Aleppo, but then he became incredibly successful, built hospital, became, renowned as a surgeon. And
Wow.
his son, Ernest, is my grandfather. He then, in his generation, he actually got exiled by the government and they lost everything. So, I mean, there's a long story to that, which I won't go into, but I just think it's really interesting that having kind of been left Armenia,
Yeah.
settled in a new place, and then to be thrown out with 3 days' notice
Wow.
and at that point they had the hospital, they had land, they were very successful,
That's the
they
Pluto
lost
sun.
everything.
Gosh.
And so
And
it
became, and just to butt in here with the astrology, here is Chiron in your chart in Aquarius, and that can often mean the exile, somebody who doesn't fit in. Isn't that interesting?
mm, and I think that was going on just before or around the time I was conceived. And so my mum would have got the news of her family losing everything around the time that I was growing in her womb. So that I think is quite significant because for my mum, she
Well,
wasn't there. She was in Morocco. I was born in Morocco, but that's a big thing to think. Well, I can never go home. I can never go home to where I was born, where I grew up. Um, so yeah,
and
that's
this astrologically, it is very much represented for me by Pluto. So your mum, Pluto in the 12th house can often mean a difficult birth, or it can mean trauma around. They're carrying some form of ancestral trauma, and here we have Pluto in the 12th with you. So you are carrying the essence of that.
yeah.
Does that
I
make sense
mean, I
to you?
feel that makes sense because my mum, she never really grieved, I don't think, or we never talked about. I mean, she always talked about her family, but there was a sense in which she she just wanted to move on. She didn't grieve.
Mm,
Um, and she died of everything to do with the lungs, emphysema, bronchitis, pneumonia, lungs, which in the Chinese medicine system is to do with grief.
absolutely.
Um,
And
so yeah,
and it's interesting that you've got your moon in Scorpio at
yeah,
29 degrees. That's a very at the anaretic degree, which is very intense. It's the last degree of the Scorpio sign. So here's your mother having these in deep traumatic. A Scorpio is can be this sense of trauma again, this sense of being robbed of power or not understanding it, but this deep seated experience going on, which you've come here to finish off or to resolve, because for you, your moon is at 29 degrees. So there is something here about mastery over emotions.
hmm.
So I don't know how that plays out for you.
Well, again, I've spent a long time doing a lot of inner work, and probably out of everybody in my generation and my family, I'm probably the one who's done that work. In my mother's generation, her sister Taki did that work. She was in psychoanalysis for years, like 5 days a week. And she's the only one who wrote about the Armenians and processed some of that. She wrote 2 books and she visited Armenia, and she was very much, she felt like she digested and processed a lot of that trauma for the
Mm,
family. But again, for me, I think, yeah, that's probably what drew me to being a psychotherapist.
Yes, and it's interesting that, again, I want to go here to this little symbol here of the key, which is the wounded healer for you, which is also at 29 degrees. So it's almost like you've come to finish off this sort of sense of being the exile. There is this, or not belonging or not fitting in, and it's right opposite all your all these planets in the 12th house. So bringing the unconscious to life, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What we have to do with trauma, because it often sits in the unconscious. We might be aware of feeling unease or difficult feelings which we don't understand, but it's only when we bring that to light. Pluto, we absorb the whole concept of Pluto and the journey of death and transition and rebirth, that we can start to release the ancestral patterns that we're carrying.
That's interesting. Yeah.
How's that played out in your life?
Well, the word belonging struck a chord with me because I was born in Morocco. I left at 3.5. I spent my whole childhood traveling and living in different places. And so that sense of belonging everywhere and nowhere is very much in my experience. And I think because my mum has blocked her grieving, I was also never allowed to grieve when I left a place. It was always, oh, we're on to the next place. Isn't this going to be exciting? And never mind that I lost my tree that I loved to climb, or that lovely place, or my friends, or that didn't seem to there was no space for that. And so, this feeling of like not belonging anywhere has definitely been very, very strong.
Well,
and maybe it continued that sense of exile, because I was not exiled by the government, but I was kind of moved around a lot.
Well, it's interesting because you've got this Chiron at 29 degrees, which is absolutely square your the moon, the mother. So the wound is really was very activated by her, this sense of feeling the outsider, and her and moon in Scorpio can be so broody, secretive, but it kind of, there's such a depth to it, but it can be very if it isn't owned, it can come out in very Scorpio ways, which is, the tail comes up, and we're not going to do that, and this sense of broodiness, secretness. And I think people who've been exiled often are secretive because they have to be, because
Yeah,
it's about a Scorpio is about survival.
you
So
have
your
to fit
sun
in.
was activated in this sense of survival, surviving. How do I survive in my, yeah.
And I think the other thing is being born with a big birthmark on my face.
Yes,
It's like other, being
yes,
very, being sort of singled out at being the French midwives who delivered me were horrified because I think they were French Catholics. I think for them, it's the mark of the devil. So they were like kind of recoiled when I came out, apparently. So there is something about other in there as well.
or carrying the mark of your
Mm,
ancestry literally on your face. And it's so
mm,
interesting because that's what we present to the world, isn't it?
mm.
Do people talk or remark on the birthmark, Jane, or do people kind of like, just pass it over?
Very often it's children who will come up and say, oh, what's that big mark on your face? And I quite like it because they're being really upfront.
Yes,
And yeah, I think what it did for me was it sent me inside, maybe in that hidden thing. I was a very rich inner world.
yes.
And I think I made the decision that the outer world didn't really matter and that I went in.
Well, that's
So,
the very 12th house.
mm,
going within, being connected to the collective. A very internal
Dreamy.
journey.
Mm,
It's
mm,
what is actually, it is what is God. As
mm.
long as the word God is okay for you, or the light, or the collective,
Yeah, whatever. Yeah,
greater
yeah.
than me.
I was felt very connected to everything, but from that inner place of, it's almost like I knew that appearances didn't matter. But actually, I had to learn in the end that I could enjoy wearing clothes I loved and having a house that I loved, and I could enjoy those outer things. But I had to learn that. I didn't have that innately.
So I mean, you've created a very solid home for yourself with a very solid marriage and very solid relationships with your children. So do you, how do you feel that do you feel like you're doing it for your ancestors, if you like, that creating this solid base? It's interesting that you've got 4 planets in Earth and you've got an ascendant, and the Earth signs are practical and solidly based. You stand on the Earth. It's solid.
Mm. Well, it's only fairly recently that I have landed in this place where I live. And it's only, well, we've been here about 7 years. So I have lived in Glastonbury for over 30 years, but there's a restlessness in me where I tend to want to move every 3.5 years. And it's almost like I get a kind of, that's when I left Morocco. So every 3.5 years, oh, I'm meant to be leaving. And it's only now, having landed in this place, which is, I love, I feel really, really settled. And it's great.
Interesting, because you've got Jupiter sitting on your IC. So the IC is the base of the chart, it's home. And Jupiter is in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is the cosmic gypsy. So it's always wanting to move on
Yes.
out into the world, and firing its arrows off. Let's go over there now. So you've moved a lot in your life, which is not surprising. But the other side of Sagittarius is this desire for faith and truth, and this sense of what does faith mean to me? So you can often be a traveler of psychology as well
Mm-hmm.
as being an actual traveler when you've got Sagittarius on your IC, the place of home.
That's
And
so
Sagittarius
interesting.
is in its own sign. It's very strong in you. This
Mm.
need to be the traveler.
And about 25 years ago, the year after my mother died, interestingly enough, is when I connected to the Sufi lineage that I work with, and part of it. And then I felt I'm coming home. I've come home.
So
So
that, so the Sufi, and I can only imagine that was part of your lineage. Did you have ancestors that practice Sufism?
don't know.
No.
Don't think so. I mean, the Armenians were Christian. But I mean, you can be a
Yeah.
Sufi and be a Christian.
Just wondering about the lot that went to Syria. They would
Well,
have
he
exploded.
had great, he had real Asadur Altunian, my great grandfather, had real ethics. Like he refused to not treat the Turkish general when his daughter, I think it was really ill, and other people were saying, "Whoa, Turks,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
can't treat the Turks. They massacred you." And he was like, "No, no, I'm going to treat him." And he had that sort of ethics about him. But I don't know. And I think he was a very strong practicing Christian, but I don't think he was I've never heard anything about Sufism.
It's an interesting, because it's the mystical branch of Islam.
Mm, mm,
I'm wondering if, because you've got such a strong 12th house, this sense of mysticism, or wanting to explore mysticism as part of the healing of your lineage or the trauma,
mm.
it's all part of that picture.
Wow, yeah, that
You know,
makes sense.
consciousness.
Mm,
William Mead is very interesting about the Christ consciousness in people's charts, particularly for people who've got a strong Cancer or uh, 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 Pisces, and of course your 12th house is traditionally ruled by Pisces, although yours personally is ruled by Leo. So there is this sense of wanting to express, deeply express what perhaps belief means to you. I mean, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 planets in your 12th, plus your North Node. Now, I want to just to check this out with you as well, because I found this really interesting. This comes from Judith Hill, who has been doing astrology forever, and she's a medical astrologer, and she does a lot of work with the North nodes and the South nodes to do with health and well-being. And she says that when your North node is sitting on the ascendant, which yours is the North node, so the South node for you is in the 6th house, there can be a sense of coming back very quickly to do this work, to do the work that you're here to do, to find out who you are within the context of this, the lineage that you come from. And do you feel like if you're okay talking about this concept of past lives and coming back, or you incarnated very quickly?
No idea, but I mean, it's possible. I was born really quickly.
You were born were you really?
Yeah. But no, I don't know. I don't have a sense of time around that. I feel like, I'm very open to the fact that I could have had other lives, but I don't have a sense of time around that, really.
But that's very interesting that you were born very quickly. So the North Node, often in Virgo, is really about this sort of sense of, it carries this sense of purification. How can we purify ourselves? How can we make this world a better place? And because it's absolutely on your ascendant, this is very strong in your chart. And Virgo is also about, can be very self-critical. Oh my gosh, I don't know if that plays out in your world, but it is this sense of being very attuned to health and well-being. And what does that mean? It can be very detail orientated. It can be quite anxious because the world isn't the perfect place that it wants it to be. And I wonder if that plays out for you.
Definitely about being drawn to look at healing, and I feel very strongly that being in my profession of the psychotherapy, I don't want psychotherapy to be part of the problem, as in our culture, everything's got so individualized.
Yes.
It's all me. And I kind of feel like that's what I love about eco-psychology, is that it connects to, it's a bit like, if I think of like how much of my body is actually microbes, my microbiome, that's not, it's a huge, more cells than my actual body cells. So we are part of the whole, and it's for me, it's that drives me. I want to be part of that stream of remembering that we're not just a skin encapsulated ego, that we are part of.
Yeah, it's so interesting because Virgo is the earth. She is an earth sign. She's Ceres, the goddess Ceres. So she's so attuned to the whole concept of what earth is, what growing is, what the seasons of the year are. And there's this beautiful sense of her, and she's mutable, so she's very attuned to swimming with the seasons of the earth. And you've got a very strong, what we would call a mutable T-square in your chart. So there is this sense of, for you, which is which can really drive you. You can feel quite driven by this. So there is this sense of um, a feeling that you really want to engage with this, but it may not seem to have. Sometimes it doesn't have sides to it, but it feels like there is this sense of imagination or wanting to create or being driven to really engage with this North Node healing, wanting to work with the earth as part of what you offer.
Mm.
And that,
Wow.
yeah, it's really strong in your chart, Jane. And it goes, and you've even got a Venus in Virgo. So there is this love of earth,
Mm.
very analytical Venus and Virgo.
Very Virgo, isn't it? It's very Virgo. I've
One,
always thought of Virgos as perfectionists, but I'm not. I don't think I'm a. I have not got a neat, perfect house, and I don't.
and that's interesting because it can often happen. Apparently, I have a Virgo moon. I don't have a very neat, not a tidy house, but some Virgos do. I mean, especially if you're a Virgo sun, which you are, but yours is kind of hidden in the 12th house, so it isn't so maybe in your face as much as other people's can be. But it is this sense of how do we make this world a better place?
Yeah.
Feel that you're carrying, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but this sense of carrying that, because I guess your ancestries, the people that were exiled, must have felt that.
Mm.
How do we do this differently? This
Mm.
can't happen.
Mm. Yeah.
Fascinating. And you've got your the MC, which is the highest, that's where the sun was at the height of your chart when you were born. It's in Gemini, and it's right next door to Mars. So there's a very active desire here to teach, to pass on knowledge, to communicate. It's like that's given to you.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
definitely been part of the last sort of 15 or so
yes,
years. I've been
yes.
doing more and more teaching. Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, you've got the ruler of your MC is Mercury, which is in its own sign of Virgo in the 12th house. So I wonder if your ancestors, I guess they were teachers too, or they were very actively involved, as you say, as doctors.
Mm. Yeah. They had a teaching school for nurses out in Aleppo, and um, so yeah, he did. They were teaching.
And
Um,
you have your own teaching school too, don't you?
well, not personally, but I do work. I run,
Yeah.
like, next weekend. I'm running a
Yes.
rewilding therapy training in the woods, so things like that I do quite often. Um, but yeah, so that's so amazing to me that you can see all of this. It makes so much sense to me.
Well, I think that being adaptable is really important for you. And to
Mm.
be the communicator is really important for you. But the other thing that interests me, because you've got your South Node in the 6th house of health and well-being, and you've also got Chiron there. We've talked about Chiron, and people can go back and look at your chart if they want to. Um, uh, so the 6th house is often, well, it is associated with health and well-being. So, and I know we talked about you, you've just been diagnosed recently with a situation. Do you want to explain what that is?
Well, yes. So I've always been hypermobile, and I always thought, probably I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic thing. But
Hmm.
just after my dad died, I got a phone call from a geneticist who looked at my blood and said, "Oh, you've got Loeys Dietz, so it's a hypermobility syndrome, um, but it's a bit nastier. It can create, everything's a bit too stretchy, so it can create, the blood vessels can stretch too much and form aneurysms, and that's the bit that could kill you, basically. It's not a very yeah. So I've been, that was probably like 3 years ago that I was diagnosed, and then I'm being looked at, and I have got an aneurysm, but it's not life-threatening at this point. But it's something that I live with. This awareness that just as I was born really fast, it could be that I might die quite fast if my aneurysm suddenly decided to dissect. I mean, maybe that won't happen because I can have an operation, because by some weird chance they found out. I mean, I could have gone through my whole life and not known this, but.
And where do you were talking about before we started recording that you felt like this was coming from your mother's ancestry rather than your father's?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely,
do you want to explain that?
Well, I know because I've talked to cousins, and so if I look at the Altunian side, my Uncle Roger probably had it because some of his children have definitely got it, and also my my other auntie Titty, who she definitely had it because her children and grandchildren have it. So I know it's from my mother's side, but what I don't know is if it's from the Armenian side or my grandmother's side. And my theory is that it's from my grandmother's side.
Right.
Simply because there are some certain facial features, like the eyes being quite far apart, a kind of little chin, that sort of, there is kind of facial features which I'm beginning to recognize, and my grandmother has them. So I just have this feeling that it's her, but I might be wrong. I wish I could tell, but
that's very interesting because, again, I mean, astrology is multi-layered. So a planet will have more than just one symbology here. But I want to go back to your 12th house again of the ancestral the side, because Pluto's in your 12th house, but your moon, the mother, is in Scorpio, which Pluto rules.
Right.
But your survival, Pluto is all about universal survival and ancestral survival, and then you've got personal survival in Mars, playing out very strongly in your chart because it all ties in with this T-square. Do you think about death a lot more, Jane, or do you feel like it is what it is?
Oh, I got diagnosed during the pandemic, and so the NHS took ages to kind of catch up with me and explain what the hell was going on. And so I had this 9 months where I had the diagnosis, but I didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
And during that time, I was really aware of death, and in a really positive way. It's like it really woke me up to being more alive.
Yes.
And then I kind of went to sleep a bit, and and then every now and then, like recently, I've had another scan, and my aneurysm had got worse, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, wake up again. And I think I said to you, Sue, there was that lovely Rumi poem, "Don't Go Back to Sleep," that I had really meant something to me. It's like, it's good to keep it alive it seems to bring a kind of real aliveness to really live with death. I can't quite explain it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's really interesting because you have another T-square in your chart as well, so you've got Chiron, which is square your moon, which we talked about earlier, and it's fixed. So there is a resilience here. So maybe there is this sense of this involves also the sense of being the outsider, but also connected very deeply with perhaps mum, or this feeling of survival. But there is a resilience here, and then it goes to it goes back into your 12th house, particularly to Mercury in